Hi, everybody. I know that there are still a few people who are logging on and joining us, but I wanted to go ahead and get started by welcoming everyone to today's webinar, Pay Transparency Laws and Other Compliance Challenges You Need to Know for 2025. I'm Molly Vidler, and I'm here with our General Counsel, Shannon Wheeler, and our Job Store expert, Drew Sparks. For everyone who has made time out of their day to be with us, thank you so much for coming and spending the next hour with us. We know that compliance changes can be confusing and time-consuming to try and figure out, so hopefully by the end of this, we can clear things up and answer any questions you might have. But before we get to that, I wanted to go over just a few housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and sent to you within the next 24 hours. So if you get interrupted or have to jump off the call, don't worry about it. You will get the recording, a link to the Pay Transparency Support Center article, and the slide deck sent to your email tomorrow afternoon, so you can review it whenever you have time. And then lastly, I wanted to go over the GoToWebinar panel you might be seeing on your screen. You can use that to view the handouts that Shannon will mention later in her presentation, and also to ask questions at any time throughout the webinar. We will do a Q&A session at the end, so anytime you have a question, feel free to use that question box and we will get to it if we have time at the end. So with all of that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Drew and Shannon and let them get started.
Hey, thanks, Molly. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining today while we talk about pay transparency laws and some other compliance challenges that you will want to know going into 2025. I'm so excited to be here today with Drew Sparks. He is one of my favorite Job Store Concierge members. I'm sure many of you have met Drew as well. I just in general want to shout out to the entire Job Store Concierge team. They are fantastic. They're doing an incredible job. They're there to help you. And it's a fantastic service if you haven't used it. Okay, so next slide. Awesome. Thank you, Drew. So as always, I have to give my legal disclaimer. Since we'll be talking about a bunch of laws and regulations and issues, the following is not legal advice. This is just information to help you with your compliance efforts. And so, of course, we disclaim any warranties with this presentation of the information provided herein. So let's dive in. So this is the agenda. These are some of the things we're going to cover today. However, our main focus is going to be on all the new pay transparency laws that are coming out, so that we can hopefully talk about the laws and the regulations going into effect and then answer some of your questions. So next slide. Awesome. So this new wave of pay equity efforts that is really laws sweeping the United States are these pay transparency laws. If you were around about 5 years ago, all you heard about were salary history bans. That's where you can't ask the prior salary, wage, or pay on the application. I want to be clear, those laws are still in effect. And in and around that time, we updated our Intella app, if as many of you might remember. So if you have that functionality in place, that salary history band functionality in place, that will hide the pay question from your application when a resident lists their address in that location. So that is still in effect, as those laws are still in effect. But what we're really here to talk about is in the last few years, these pay transparency laws. And these are on a state-by-state basis, and they continue to be enacted state after state after state. That's sort of how these laws roll out. So I'm going to talk generally about what most of these pay transparency laws cover, and then we'll go into a few of the key states that you need to know. But as always, if you advertise in any of these states, it's good to know the very specific laws in each of these states. Seek legal counsel, get the specifics, get the detail to make sure you are compliant. So generally, these laws require, one almost done. I know. Generally, these laws require that you disclose a pay range and a description of benefits in a job posting or upon request. And I'm going to dig into what these statements mean here in just a minute. And currently, as of today, and these are literally changing by the day, but as of today, there are 12, what I'm going to call jurisdictions, because some of them are states, some of them are cities, but 12 jurisdictions that require pay disclosures in job postings. Okay, now you can switch it up. Change, there we go. All right, so most of these laws refer to what I'm going to call a job posting, and that's the actual word that's used in the law. And again, these vary by state, but most of them, a job posting is any solicitation for a specific available job, whether that is electronic or a hard copy posting that includes a qualification for an applicant. The key thing about the word posting is that it's broader than a job advertisement. So a lot of times you think of a posting, you're like, oh, it's just, that's my job ad. Yes, but it's broader than that. It can be more than something that you pay for, more than something that you put dollars behind. So what I want you to consider is that it's just any solicitation out there that has reference to a specific job trying to get a candidate to apply for that job or be hired for that job opening. We believe that any enabled active job is going to fall under this job posting definition for most of these states, if not all of them. And so an enabled active job is going to show up organically in Driver Pulse, even if you don't put dollars behind it. That's why it's really key that any enabled active job has this information in it that we're going to talk about. Even if you don't have dollars behind it, or you don't believe it's posted anywhere, if it's enabled, it is in Driver Pulse, and drivers can search for it and see it there at no dollars, right? And then also, we believe these would apply to job requisitions, which are also things that you don't see people placing dollars behind, and you just put a job requisition out there, if it's required for your OFCCP compliance and other things. We also believe that would qualify as a job posting. So be aware of those. Look across, your organization and where you are placing any solicitations about jobs, and really do an evaluation of whether that's a job posting or not. All right, so the next key definition is, and this is the unpopular one, the pay range. Sometimes they refer to it as a salary range or a wage range. And I know that this is not a favorite amongst employers. I know this is not something that everybody says, oh yeah, I want to post the pay range. I mean, it is really good and is really highly recommended. You get more activity to jobs that have pay disclosed in it, but the pay range is what these specific laws are requiring. And so what does that mean? It means a minimum and a maximum, like the actual range of what the pay could be. It cannot be open-ended, so it would not meet the requirements of most of these state laws if you said something like $1,500 per week and higher. They actually want to see a range. And then if you qualify that minimum and maximum in any way, that also would be a violation or it not meet the state requirements. So if you say the average pay is this minimum to this maximum, that's not going to meet it, or the typical pay or most make, that kind of language or qualification is not going to work to meet these laws. Also, you can have a broad range. There's no restriction. I've yet to see a state law that has a restriction that says, oh, it has to be within $5,000 to $10,000 range. You can have a very broad range. It can be, $0 to $5,000 or whatever your pay is. It can be, $100,000 range that you put in there. It just has to be a range. Now, obviously, if you want your job ad to be effective, you might want to rethink what that range is, but it's not limited in what that range can be. And then I know we get a lot of questions around, well, what if the pay is just the pay? It's a single rate, like it's 75 cents per mile. What do I do? There's no range, it's just this amount. Well, then that's the amount, but you should give it as a range, like 75 cents per mile to 75 cents per mile, so that it's very clear that's the range, that's the pay. So I'm sure many of you are asking, how do I do this? How do I come up with that range? And that's the question. And that's really, something that you need to go back and discuss with your decision makers and your business. That's a business decision that you all will need to make for the open positions that you're advertising for. And decide, look at, good to document those things, document how you came up with it. And most of these laws say generally speaking, that just has to be a good faith basis when you're coming up with these. I've seen recommendations for the most reasonable and generally expected range of compensation for that job. And so it could be what you have budgeted, it could be what you actually pay people doing that job or similar jobs, or it could be what you intend to pay for the open job. So those are just some considerations when you are coming up with this pay range to think about that the law requires. And remember, each state is different. This is generally speaking across all states that I'm trying to give you some tips on. So other things to think about when trying to comply with these laws is to list all other compensation. In fact, most of them require that you list all other compensation. So any bonuses, commissions, and profit sharing are good things to list. I want to back up for just a minute. I don't know that I fully described the reason or the rationale for these behind these laws, and what the purpose is, or what the stated purpose is, I guess I should say, is that somebody, before applying for the job, somebody who sees the job advertisement or the solicitation, the job posting, knows what the range of pay can be, so that they're more informed in negotiating what that pay range is going to be. And it's trying to level the playing field for pay equity between, minorities. And some of them specifically state, gender gaps, things like that. But that's the stated goal. And so what we see is, I'm going to talk about some specific states and some of the litigation we're seeing, is we're seeing the allegations state, I saw this job posting and I wouldn't have applied if I knew the wage range, if I knew the range of pay that they were going to give me. I wouldn't have wasted my time applying, because ultimately, when I got the job or when I talked to the individual after applying, I realized that it wasn't pay that I was interested in. So that's sort of the gist of what we're seeing and why the laws are requiring these things. Okay, so I want to talk about percent of gross for just a minute. We've gotten a lot of questions around that. Drew's shaking his head. He's like, yes, I get a lot of these questions. So percent of gross is not a pay range. I know that's how a lot of carriers pay. That's how a lot of jobs are set up and designed. It's just, it doesn't meet the qualifications of these laws. So unfortunately, percent of gross is not one of the fields that you're going to want to, I mean, you can also include that in the job description, but it's not one of the fields that we're going to talk about here in a minute when we talk about our Tenstreet functionality, simply because it doesn't meet the requirements of a pay range. But to kind of address that point, I know percent of gross is often talked about when you're looking for owner operators or independent contractors. And I've heard some people say, well, hey, we are only posting this job for independent contractors or owner operators. We don't need to disclose the pay range. And I just want to push back, or have you think about that a little bit harder, because what we're seeing, particularly in the state of Washington, I'm going to talk about the state of Washington in just a minute, but what we're seeing is, just by virtue of the fact that an advertisement, a posting, doesn't have a pay range, puts you at risk. It puts your company at risk. We are seeing lots and lots of litigation in Washington, and simply by virtue of not having a wage range, you are putting your company at risk for a lawsuit. And then the fact that the job posting is for an independent contractor position or an owner operator position, that's a defense to the lawsuit once you're already in it. So talk to your lawyers about that. I highly recommend you have it. You don't have to, you can still state in the job posting, this is a 1099 position or an owner operator position. And just by having a pay range in there doesn't prevent you from it being an employee position or a company driver position. It can still be an owner operator position. You just also have that wage range in there, and it really will protect you from even getting a lawsuit in the first place, and not having to, on the back end defend that lawsuit because it didn't have it in there up front. Okay, next slide. So some of the other key terminology in these laws is a general description of benefits. And I get a lot of questions. What does that mean? Well, here's some examples of what that means. What it boils down to, and most of the state laws say this, it's that the benefits as reported for federal tax purposes. So 401k or other retirement benefits, paid time off, sick leave, vacation benefits, things along those lines are things you're going to want to put in the benefits section if you offer those things. Of course, if it's a 1099 position, you can simply state something along the lines of, no benefits offered, it's a 1099 position. Or I think, Drew, you have a very clever statement. What was it?
Sorry, what was that? I was responding to questions in the chat.
Oh, pay attention. No, I'm just kidding. What is it that you recommend be put for a general description of benefits?
Anything that, like, I'm trying to remember what I said earlier, but anything that is going to be a good thing that's in there, anything that adds some extra pizzazz to it, is really good to put in that general description of benefits.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
Okay.
Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so now I want to talk about Washington. Like I said before, this is a hot spot for litigation. I just want to pause here for a minute and say, if you have job postings in Washington, if you hire out of Washington, it will be worth your time to contact a lawyer, spend 30 minutes with them. What should we be aware of? What should we make sure is in all of our job ads? I'm going to talk through that here. Obviously, this is not legal advice. It's worth your time to contact a specific lawyer in Washington, and I can give you recommendations if you would like. Just reach out to your account manager. I'm happy to send those out. But it's worth it, because what's happening in Washington is that there is a very high penalty associated with that any person who sees the job ad can bring a lawsuit. And so let's kind of dive in. The law applies to employers with 15 or more employees engaging in business in Washington. So if you have any business in Washington and you have 15 or more employees, even if those employees are not Washington-based employees, then you are subject to this law. The job posting, however, is a posting that would recruit a Washington-based employee or a job that could be filled by a Washington-based employee. So if you are advertising or soliciting or putting anywhere in Washington or somewhere where a Washington-based employee could fill it, you're going to want to pay attention, because this law is the most significant pay transparency law that exists, and one that I've never seen. It's been in effect since January 1st of 2023. I think I actually mentioned it at the user conference this year and said, hey, pay attention to what's happening in Washington. And we have carriers that are being sued right now. The plaintiffs' lawyers are out there. They're looking for ads. They're finding ads that don't have a wage range, and they're bringing lawsuits. These laws are not industry specific to the trucking industry, but plaintiffs' lawyers have found the trucking industry, and they're looking for jobs that don't have a wage range. So these are class action lawsuits. And if they don't have just the very minimum sort of low hanging fruit of a minimum and a maximum and a general description of benefits, essentially the law allows anyone to be able to sue that would have applied to that job or that would have been eligible. So somebody who is a resident of Washington. And then what happens is the penalty is a $5,000 per applicant damages in their lawsuit. And there's not much in the way of defenses. Most companies I see are just settling these lawsuits because there's not much to say in defense. The key thing is, and this is difficult, is that you're going to want to talk to your lawyer. You're going to want to, definitely get some legal advice on this. But my understanding is that it doesn't necessarily have to be that the individual clicked that job posting and applied to the job through that job posting. That my understanding is that the applicants could be any applicants that applied during the time that the job posting was live. Those numbers add up very, very quickly. We've had several carriers that are part of Tenstreet that have been sued under this law, and I hate to hear that, and they are, left with very few options but to settle. So please pay attention to your Washington job ads. If you have a Washington job ad right now that is active, go look at it, go add a pay range and a general description of benefits.
I remembered my general description of benefits thing, so I'm gonna go back on that one. So on this one, if you are a 1099, you don't have benefits, right? Say this is a 1099 or something like it, right? That is a general description of benefits because you may not have any. So having that in there is really important. Make it sound nice. You can add extra things in there, but obviously put that in there whether or not you have benefits. The absence of a benefits is a description of the benefits you offer. So keep that one in mind. And we'll go back to Washington and Colorado.
Okay, so Colorado is the next state I want to talk about. And actually, I'm going to pause here for a minute. And Molly, if you could post the link to our support center article, I meant to mention this earlier. We have created an article in the support center talking about pay transparency and the new functionality in Tenstreet that Drew's about to talk about. But what it also has in it is a chart that outlines each state that currently has a pay transparency law and has some tidbits about the details of what those laws are. I'm only going to talk about a few of the bigger states that I want to bring to your attention, Washington obviously being the biggest one based on the high penalties there. But I'm only talking about a handful of states, but Colorado was one, and I wanted to mention it. And so I think Molly, are you posting that link, or how can they get access to that support center article?
It's in the chat, but they do have to be logged in to their Tenstreet dashboard to see that. So if you're having trouble with the link, just make sure you're logged in and then retry. But you'll also get it in the email we send out tomorrow, so you'll have access to it either way.
Perfect. Thank you. And then while I was back on Washington, I just want to also mention one of the handouts, my apologies for not mentioning this sooner. One of the handouts, the Equal Pay and Opportunities Act, I think that's the PDF I sent to Molly, is a Washington Department of Labor specific handout that the Washington Department of Labor has put out about how to comply with their specific pay transparency law. So go take a look at that. There's a whole section, I think you have to scroll down, it's like the second or third page that says, pay transparency. And then there's very detailed information about how to comply with their law, who it applies to, all those things. So that's a really good resource too that you can look at specific to Washington. Okay, now on to Colorado. Sorry for jumping around. So Colorado, as many of you might be aware, has had a pay transparency law in effect for a few years. They actually have amended it, and there will be new requirements as of January 1st of 2025. Colorado is a bit different. It applies to employers with at least one employee working from Colorado. So it's a little bit broader than some of the other laws that we see that have a minimum threshold of like 15. Instead of a job posting, they refer to it as a job opportunity and then a job opportunity notice. That's the language that Colorado law uses. And so a job opportunity, again, is very broad. It's a current or anticipated vacancy or open position where an employer is considering or interviewing candidates or that the employer externally posts. And then a job opportunity notice is the equivalent of what we were talking about with a job posting. It's a notice of the job opportunity that could be performed in Colorado. So including remote positions. So if it's a job that could be filled by a Colorado resident, it applies. And so if that's the case, then you have to have these next bullet point of things. You have to have the pay rate, including, and that's a range, including all compensation being offered. You have to have a general description of benefits, and then uniquely to Colorado, you have to have the application deadline, if there is one. If you don't have one, like if it's an evergreen posting, you have to specifically state that there is no deadline because the employer accepts applications on an ongoing basis. So that creates a little bit more of a burden for carriers who are posting in Colorado or who have job ads in Colorado. You need to actually have some sort of statement about either a deadline or that it's evergreen. And then you have to have how to apply for the job opportunity. And that can just be to apply, click here, like you would typically want to include. So make sure you include those things. Also, if you are doing business in Colorado and the Colorado pay transparency law would apply to you, you're also going to want to seek out and talk to a specific attorney about these Colorado laws, because in addition to those posting requirements, there's other requirements. You cannot ask about pay, prior pay history, which has been in effect for quite a while. But one of the new things that's going into effect is that you have to post selection notices and career progression notices. And these are like internal notices about what the pay is or pay ranges that were given when you had job opportunities that were filled. So it's a little bit more complicated than any other state. Colorado has sort of been out in front of all the other states with these pay transparency laws. So go read about those, go figure out what you would need to do to comply with those things specifically if you're doing business in Colorado. And then just to mention the fines in Colorado, which we are seeing Colorado enforce these laws. We're even seeing Colorado in some instances, egregious instances, they will post the employer's name in the specific violation publicly. So it's not something where you want your name to be, but the fines are anywhere from $500 to $10,000 per violation. So make sure you are up to speed on Colorado's law. Okay, and the next state I want to talk about is Illinois. And Illinois is what's going to essentially cause a lot of heartache for employers. It goes into effect January 1 of 2025, and it applies to employers with 15 or more employees in Illinois. So it is limited to that. Of course, this includes Chicago and the areas surrounding Chicago if they're in Illinois. It applies to jobs that could be performed in Illinois, either in full or in part, or where the employee reports to a supervisor or work site in Illinois. So that's sort of the world of applicability with regard to this Illinois law. And it requires a pay scale or a range, just like we've been talking about, all other compensation offered along with a general description of benefits. Pretty much the things that I've talked about with the key terminology, that's what's going to apply to Illinois law. The only sort of unique thing to Illinois is that Illinois new law has sort of this whole section on how you can comply, and this is different from any other state law, but how you can comply with the requirements through a publicly available web page that then you link to in your job ad. So that's available, and none of the other states say whether they will accept that or not, but that was unique to Illinois. The key thing in Illinois that's going to drive a lot of change, I think, in the market and the industry is that Illinois will apply to third parties, meaning it will third parties will be liable or will potentially be liable along with the employer for not posting the wage range and the general description of benefits. So you're going to start to see a lot of third parties like job search sites require these fields specifically in Illinois for the jobs that are posted on them because they don't want to be liable either. So the penalties are, a complaint that can be made with the Illinois Department of Labor, as well as fines that can range from $250 to $10,000. So be aware, Illinois coming up January 1st of 2025. Right, next page. All right, so I'm not going to mention all the states and all the laws. Those are the three main ones I wanted to mention. And then there's a few other notable requirements that I just want you all to be aware of. Of course, be aware and keep up to date on the states and as they roll out and as they can, continue to come out, so that you can, be compliant with your company and know where you advertise and what the rules are in the particular places where you have job postings. But in general, most of these state laws also come with just a disclosure of the pay range and benefits upon request. So almost all of them say if you get a request for these things, you have to provide it. Of course, I have to mention California. As we all know, California is always one of the front runners in these states. They have had a law in effect for a couple of years that require pay transparency or pay range in the job postings. But California has been amended. There are new things going into effect January 1. Specifically, the employers do not have to be in California, but and the job posting doesn't even have to be seeking somebody in California. But if it could be filled remotely by an employee living in California, then it is applicable. So be aware of that. In addition, employers who have 100 or more employees in California must report the pay data of those employees to the California DFEH. That's I wrote it down here, the Department of Fair Housing and Employment. So if you are located in California, if you have a lot of employees in California, know that you will have to start reporting that specific data to the California authorities. And then one of the things that's important in California is that California has this what's called a PAGA Act, or a Private Attorney General Act, and it allows for private individuals who are aggrieved by these laws to bring lawsuits for the penalties that exist. And so for the Pay Transparency Act, they can do that. Individuals can bring a PAGA action against a company for violation of this law. So make sure you're compliant in California. New Jersey, in preparing for this webinar, I just found New Jersey added and signed into effect a pay transparency law as of November 18th, so just a couple of days ago, that will go into effect June 1st of 2025. So be aware of that. We're updating everything internally to include New Jersey. Connecticut is an interesting one. So these next few don't necessarily have a requirement for it to be in the job posting, but they have some interesting disclosure laws. So you have to disclose the pay range prior to or at the time of the offer. In Connecticut, same in Cincinnati and Toledo, Ohio, you have to disclose the pay range after extending the offer. And in Rhode Island, you have to disclose it upon offer or upon hire. And then in Nevada, upon completing the interview or before that. So just be aware that there are some other disclosures that are required that do not necessarily have to be upon request or in the job posting. Okay, so let's talk about our new functionality really quick. So we have added new fields in active jobs and in job requisitions for pay ranges and for description of benefits. So you'll see specific fielded sections in those screens that Drew's about to show you for filling in a minimum and a maximum and the general description of benefits as needed. Of course, you've always had the ability to include these disclosures in your job description, but what we wanted to do was we wanted to add additional fields to help you out so that you can, manage your compliance better, so that you can track the states that you're compliant with, so that you can keep track of all your job, active jobs and your job requisitions, and where do you have pay ranges and things along those lines. So we've added these fields. I've had a lot of ideas come to me about how we can do these things, and we feel like this is the best solution and the easiest solution for you all. And when you have these fields, it will be visible in Pulse, on the Intella app, and in job requisitions. And then it will also have these fields that will be a part of the downstream postings with third parties that you have, whether it be, other integrations or into, your advertised jobs. So I'm going to turn it over to Drew and let him show you.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. I will get in here and show you everything as far as how this one goes. I'm going to start off by going into the active job. and showing how that all works. So right here, and Shannon, make sure, yep, I think it just changed. So I've got this up right here. This is our demo system, so you may see some things in here. Wanted to pull up just a transparency job that I made. So right here, I had created an active job for transparency. So right in here, you can see all of the stuff. You've got our things here. I've got this built in Tennessee, which currently does not have any pay transparency rules, but just because I like keeping things safe, I went ahead and added that information there. So right here, you've got all of the different things. As a reminder, the internal name, this only shows internally. The thing that shows externally on anywhere you post that job is going to be the posting title. So I've got the CDLA flatbed driver with regional, and then I have our job pay and benefits section here. So this is what is new. So right here we have, and I made this quickly, so I did $1,500 a mile, which is not quite right. So I'm going to do $1,500 a week and then change both of these to a week. Right here, this amount field is what you remember from previous. So $1,500 per week. We also have per mile, per hour, per day, per year, and percentage of gross, right? This new section, the minimum and the maximum, has per mile, per hour, per day, per week, and per year. It does not have percentage of gross because, like Shannon was talking about, that's not a minimum and maximum pay range. That's just how pay is determined, right? So right here, I've got a $1,500 per week. You can also put, let's say this one right here, I believe this one pays 42% of line haul, which sounds pretty good. So we're going to do 42% of gross right here. The driver can realistically expect to make $1,200 to $1,700 weekly, given that 42% of gross, right? General description of benefits. I put in, everything from Beagle insurance, health, dental, vision, anything that is a perk for that driver that, HR would handle. 401k matching, holidays and vacations, all of that sort of stuff. You're going to want to put that in there. Right now on this one, there's not formatting available, but we're looking at adding that soon. So right here, we're going to go down. Job enabled right here. This is probably not something that you guys have used very often. This is getting more useful with this update. So when the job is enabled, what this means is it is visible externally where Tenstreet jobs may be scraped or on the Driver Pulse app in that organic jobs listing, right? So what you want to do is if a job is enabled, it's going to show there. If a job is not enabled, it is not going to show on those listings. If you have a job that you have up right now, maybe it's a generalized job or a posting that you're not able to add a minimum and maximum pay range, go ahead and turn that off there. We're rolling out an update today that is going to be updating, I think it's today, that is going to be updating this where you can turn those jobs off and keep them from showing if you're not able to update them, right? As soon as you turn that off, it starts removing that from anywhere that is scraping from Tenstreet for job details. This does not change if your job is posted on Indeed or Facebook or Pulse Match through the job store. If a job is not enabled, all it does is control that organic visibility. Well, I can show you how to change those other stuff if you need it, or if you're working with Concierge, feel free to reach out to them. I don't know. If you're working with me, reach out to me. Many of you already have. So job highlights, got all of the stuff here. This right here is not visible, so don't use this one. It looks like I was pasting a little fast and put the general description of benefits in there. But job highlights, right now, this is going to be a future release. Currently, this is not visible anywhere. Job requirements, break out those requirements, make sure that you have those requirements all in right here. Job description, all of this stuff right here. So like I said before, you can add additional, I encourage it as a marketing person to, give that full picture of the job to the driver. Because if you're paying 42% of line haul, what does that mean? Does your pay well or pay well? Does it not pay well? What the driver usually wants to know, and many of you have heard me preach, like what are they going to bring home a week? What does it look like to their bank account? So you're going to say, $1,500 a week, driver's average, right? If you remember, our range minimum is $1,200 to $1,700, so it's kind of right in there. You've got all of your information right here. You have it, and you're good to go. Once again, we've got all of this stuff, and then you can do that there. Any changes you make here are immediately saved. Those begin, if you have an ad running, those show immediately on Pulse and other places. Sometimes other places take a little bit to update, like Indeed, usually takes 4 to 6 hours to update automatically. If you've got questions, you can reach out to Concierge or your account manager, and we can get that good.
I just
Awesome.
want to say really quickly, I'm sure you were going to cover it. Sorry to interrupt you, Drew, but when you all go into, well, are you about to cover what it looks like if it's in a jurisdiction that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just keep quiet and let you show.
You're good. You're good. Yeah, I couldn't create a new job that wasn't compliant because obviously it would yell at you. So we're going to go right here, and I'm going to say, oh man, I'm actually going to hire this in, let's do Bloomington, Illinois. So right here, perfect. I got a new flatbed opening, home daily in Bloomington. It's perfect. It's good to go. And it's going to not yell at me right now because I have that information in there. Right here, it doesn't give you any errors because you're good to go. Let's look at a different job that may or may not be compliant there. So I think it's, okay. So right here, this is going to say location requirements not met, right? If you've got it posted in locations, you see this big red box. You can't miss it on that one. So you can either edit the location set and remove the location that is in there, which right now in this one, it looks like it's California and Colorado that are causing the issue. Or you could go in to edit this job, and you could go in and add that job pay, minimum maximum, general description of benefits, and hit save, right? If you don't want this job to run, let's say it's an old job or something that you're never going to be able to update with something, you can turn that off and then hit save, and then you'll be good to go as far as not being visible externally, right? Perfect. Cool. All right, and then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over into job requisitions. So for your lucky job requisitions users here, we have some new fields on job requisitions that keep it going. So in this example, we've got the pay transparency sample, just like our active job is connected, and it's all in there. And if you go down at the very bottom, you'll see some new things. So job general benefits description, minimum pay, maximum pay, and pay unit. So that way you can go through and make sure you're fully compliant as far as this goes. So you can see right here, you've got all of the same stuff. Everything's good to go on that one. So if somebody is browsing your job requisitions map, or if you have these posted somewhere through job recs, it will post there. A question I've gotten a lot from a lot of the marketing people is, what is this going to look like to the driver when they're looking, right? So right here, I kind of mocked up my flatbed driver. So this is our Flatbedders Inc. Posting. It's an example of how it might look on Indeed, right? So what you've got here is you're going to have all of your information just like you had. Indeed scrapes from the wage range that we put down at the bottom, so that 1,400, and it looks like I made a typo there. It's 1,200 to 1,700 per week. Once again, this was a mock-up, so I just didn't change those numbers. So 1,200 to 1,700 per week. It's going to scrape that and show that right there on the job. All of that information is right here. It's going to say wage range. All of your wage range and general description of benefits is at the very bottom of that job posting. It's also at the bottom of the job posting on Pulse and anywhere else that you're going to be able to see that through posting. For Facebook and other things that go to a landing page before sending a driver to the application, all of that information is on the job posting landing page once the driver clicks in, so that way they're able to see that before applying. Yeah. Another question that I get a lot that I'd like to touch on is, what does it look like as far as, how do I determine what's the minimum, what's the maximum, and all that sort of stuff. That is what you in good faith, like Shannon said, think that it's going to pay. For your specific stuff, I usually recommend reaching out to a lawyer, reaching out to somebody that is advising you guys legally on how to navigate this. All of these laws change sometimes quickly, and so we're trying our best to stay in touch with how things are happening on that one. Concierge, we're constantly learning. Shannon was laughing at me because I took the time to read some of the laws, which were not super exciting. The plot line was a little thin, but trying to make sure and understand how that one is going. We're specifically going to be reaching out to folks. You probably already received an email from account management or your concierge about updating your jobs. So once those jobs are updated, you should be able to see that one right And Shannon, is there anything else as far as job postings you think I should cover?
That was awesome, Drew. Thank you so much. I also want to give a shout out to our developers who've been working really hard on this. And, both me, Drew, other members of the concierge team have been sort of, here's what it should say, here's what it should like. And they've just done a fantastic job of getting these things pushed out and done at a very quick amount of time. I do want to just mention that right now, the current functionality is if you have a non-compliant job ad or a job ad that doesn't meet these requirements, it's highlighted in red, but it is still active. And it does still exist out there in Pulse and any other place downstream that you have that job going out to, that you have an order placed, and then it might be going out through the job store. It's just highlighted red as to, hey, go, change this. You will be able to, I think this functionality is rolling like today as we are speaking, go in and disable that button that Drew was showing you. So that it is no longer enabled. If you want to just go ahead and go pull those job ads off, or you can of course go in and edit it and make it compliant with the fields. If you have one that exists out there, it's staying out there. We're not doing anything with it. But if you go in to change it, you can disable it. But if you go in to change anything else on it, edit it, add other descriptions, in any way change it, you will have to add those fields in those required places. This is so that we are, helping you track these things, helping you to make sure that is out there and that exists. And then, expect that sometime before January 1 of 2025, particularly in Illinois, that we might remove any active jobs in Illinois that don't have those min-max fields for the pay range. This is to ensure to reduce liability for you, to reduce liability for us. And remember, these things are visible in Pulse organically on the Intella app and in your job requisitions. And so you do want to go track where all of these things are and make sure that you're compliant in all of these locations. The lawsuits out there are not friendly and are not fun. Especially in Washington, if you have a job ad, or job posting at all, I cannot emphasize enough, go update it right now.
And I did want to show you, I did go directly into the active job section just to keep things short, but I had a few questions about that one. So I was going to show that while I still have the demo up. So in order to get to Job Store here, it's going to be from your home screen. You're going to hit Tools, and then you're going to hit this little Job Store button, right? Some of you may only have an active jobs button, and that's okay. That does the same thing. But you can go to Job Store, and then you can hit Active Jobs up here and view all of the jobs. Any job that is not red is going to be visible in Pulse, right? If drivers search directly for your company name, so in this case, Tenstreet Demo, you're going to pop up and it's going to list out all of these jobs, whether or not you have them funded and whether or not you have them set on the Job Store. So as you look at these, anything that's not red can be visible externally. Sorry, thank you for that. I saw much.
No, great, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to move on and quickly cover some other laws for 2025 to be, well, the balance of this year and 2025 to be aware of, that we're getting a lot of questions on, just to give you some additional information. So many of you may have heard, I did talk about this at the user conference in April, November 18th, just earlier this week. The state driver's license agencies, the local DMVs, are now connected to the clearinghouse. So what happens based on, this has been a long thing to go in effect that was then delayed upon delayed upon delayed, but it is final. The states are supposed to be connected as of, I think Monday was the 18th. So what happens is that if a driver is in a prohibited status in the clearinghouse, they will literally have their CDL downgraded to remove any and all commercial driving privileges. And then that removal of their commercial driving privileges remains in effect until they successfully complete the return to duty process. So this is just an additional, sort of closing the loop step that ensures removal of drivers in a prohibited status from operating a commercial motor vehicle. So we've gotten several questions about this, and hey, what does this mean for us? Not a whole lot. Just keep doing what you're doing. You still have all of your same clearinghouse obligations just as normal. So you have your pre-employment full query, you have your limited queries annually, and then you have your obligations to report violations. So what this is really doing, it's for outside of, this sort of hiring context. It's when, a police pulls a driver over and does an inspection. They did not have, or for a violation of some sort, they did not have any insight into the state DMVs or the clearinghouse process and whether they were in a prohibited status or not. And this will give that instant insight to police officers who are pulling drivers over on the road. It also, I believe, will show up on MVRs. So when you're pulling an MVR on a driver, if their CDL has been downgraded, it will indicate that they no longer have a CDL. So pay attention to that. But as always, if you are doing your limited and full clearinghouse queries, you can sign up in the clearinghouse and in Tenstreet to get notifications when a driver's status in the clearinghouse changes. So for example, if you've run a full query on a driver in the last year, you can sign up for it. Both get emails from the clearinghouse and a push notification or a notice in the Tenstreet dashboard if the driver goes into a prohibited status. So all of that stays the same. This is just an additional step that sort of helps everybody out on the roads know what's going on in the clearinghouse for those drivers. All right, next slide, please. I want to quickly talk about and point out something that we have seen a lot of, and please do not ignore this slide. We are seeing a number of our clients involved in EEOC investigations. The EEOC has publicly announced that they have initiatives and then strategic enforcement plans, and the trucking industry is on their radar. So what the EEOC is essentially allowed to do is they've set up a task force that has a stated initiative to dismantle any business practice, pattern, or policy that results in or facilitates discriminatory practices. So what they do is they start an investigation and they come in and they seek and they gather large swaths of data to see if there are systematic issues within a company for discrimination. We are seeing them look into companies for discrimination based on race, gender, and disability. We have a number of clients that are having this happen. So be aware of it. Make sure you go look at your internal policies. Make sure you have things in writing. Make sure you aren't doing anything like, sending out emails. Oh, we're not hiring you because you're female or anything crazy like that, because it will likely to be flagged by the EEOC and is not a good idea. They also have initiatives to ensure that software and the use of AI and other, technologies along those lines aren't being used in hiring and employment decisions that would violate anyone who is federally protected under civil rights laws. Recently we have redone our scoring. If you scored on, age factors or criminal questions or things like that, we've removed that because the EEOC is specifically looking into those kinds of things. So just be careful there as well. Okay, next slide. So LA County adverse action letters. This came out a couple of months ago, and we had several of you email in questions. So what happened is the LA County, or the broader unincorporated areas of LA County, passed a law that required particular individualized assessment information. These same things were in effect, but they used to only apply within the LA city limits, but this new law applies sort of broader to these unincorporated areas of LA. And what it requires is an additional individualized assessment information to go out with the pre and the final adverse action letter. There is in California what is called the FCIHO individualized assessment form, and I've put it as a handout here. This form is not required, but all of the required information that you have to disclose is on this form. So it's just easy to use the form, but you have to have the information. The form is what has all the information in it. So I highly recommend the use of the form. and you need to have all of that information filled out that is then included and goes out with both your pre and your final adverse action letter. And then also said that these adverse action letters with this information vis-a-vis the form need to go out by mail and by email. So what you are gonna see very soon to come, I have been working with our developers, it should roll very soon, is a change in our adverse action letters for residents that are in these additional zip codes. So we essentially extended the zip codes from LA to the broader areas of LA County that are included in this. And those letters will go into a ready to mail status. And then when you're in the consumer letter tool, you'll see in the detail, you can, click into the letter and it'll have a, print full document there. You can click that button and it'll pull up all of the items that you need to complete, including that FCIHO form. You can fill it out and then you can mail and email all of those documents, which include the form that you need with all the individualized assessment information, along with all the other state notices and your adverse action letters there. So we've made it easy for you to comply with those laws. It will roll out soon, and there'll be some information in a support center article there as well. Okay, and then just lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't announce, oh yeah, sorry, next slide, you're right. Just this week, a federal judge did block the Department of Labor overtime rule, which would increase the rate of pay for all exempt employees. So this may not apply to many of you in the trucking industry, but it was sort of big news if you're watching it from an employment standpoint. First, it only applied in Texas. Well, now it applies nationwide. It has now been blocked nationwide. The rule went into effect in July 1st, and it required essentially a salary threshold of, it was going to roll out in time. It was like 44,000, and then it was like 58,000. Well, the Texas judge ruled that it is the Department of Labor exceeded its authority, and so the previous thresholds of 35,568 are back in place. And with the administration change, the rule will almost certainly not go forward. There are just some other broad things that I would say are probably not going to go forward as well from an employment standpoint that are notable. I would expect deregulation just broadly across all industries, in addition to underemployment laws. I think the independent contractor rule that was rolled out in January will also be reverted and probably not stand. At least it will go back to what it was under the previous Trump administration. I think speed limiters, that's been a hot topic over the last year. I think that's going to kind of go away and just die off, and you won't hear anything else about that. But one key thing that I do want to point out that I think will happen in 2025 is that there's a potential for greater scrutiny around I-9s. So make sure that you're following the I-9 rules and that you're getting all of those in place and taking care of business when it comes to I-9s. So, all right, next slide, I think is questions, right? Yep.
And I've been answering questions as people ask them in the chat. So if you have any more, I'm trying to think to see if there's anything that we see. So once again, this will be recorded. So we'll send you that. You'll have a copy of the deck and everything there. We'll make sure and get that over to you. Let's see, Indeed, Pulse, and some other advertisers automatically update if you update that job posting. So if you change something in there, it's automatically going to send that one over. If you've got questions on that, feel free to reach out to Concierge if you're not already working with someone, or account management if needed. So, they're coming in. All right. How does pay transparency apply to owner operators, Shannon?
So like I said before, great question. Here's the thing. It does, the very technical language of the law says employees and uses that employee language. The problem is that they're suing first, asking questions later, particularly in Washington. So it doesn't hurt you to have a wage range if it's an independent contractor position, but it could hurt you if you don't have the wage range in there. Essentially what it is it's a defense to a lawsuit or a defense to an action by the state if you don't have a wage range in your job posting. So the very technical language of the law does not apply to it. but you're going to want to include it just so that you're not swept up in, you know, the sort of low-hanging fruit that we're seeing people being sued by plaintiffs' lawyers in Washington. So, of course, speak to your lawyers. That's, you know, the legal advice that you need to talk with them about, and what the best practice is, and what you should do as a company, and the risks for your own, and, you know, your own individual company. But if I were advising my own company for independent contractors, I would say just include the pay range, because it'll help prevent a lawsuit down the line.
Got another question, and I think I can kind of answer this one. So we've got requisitions that are open for accepting applications only. I would highly discourage having any sort of generalized or multi-post advertisement out there, since the minimum pay range on our job, like active jobs, only supports one minimum pay range, or minimum and maximum pay range on the job. If you've got a job, you know, with different positions and things like that, a night shift and a day shift job posted on the same job copy, it's always best to break those out, because each of those are going to look a little bit different, people searching. Not only will it look different, but a day shift searcher and a night shift searcher are going to search for those. And so you want to make sure you're showing to the best people, and honestly, breaking it out would increase your conversions anyway. So any general like apply now or wait list ads, definitely discourage doing those at all.
I know we are almost out of time. If you have a question that we have not answered, we will be reaching out to you and answering it. I do want to just, Drew, switch to the next page. We can't get out of here without talking about the user conference in April. So please join us in May 7th through 10th in Las Vegas again. I will be there. I am sure to have a compliance talk while I am there. Of course, we'll have lots of other fun topics and things to learn about in addition to compliance. We have new functionality that we're working on right now that we can't wait to share with you then. So you can go sign up right now and secure your spot. We appreciate you all attending. Thank you so much for coming. Please also join us in Vegas. And if we have, if you had a question that we haven't been able to get to or answer, we will get back to you. We have your name, we have your email address, and we'll shoot you an email. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining on your Friday afternoon.
Yeah, enjoy your weekend.